In this episode of the Orange Nerd Show, I am joined by Evan and Tonez Poppy. We are talking all about Inside Out 2. We're going to talk box office. We're going to talk about those early reviews. We're also going to talk about some of Pete Docter's recent comments up next on this episode of the Orange Nerd Show. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of the Orange Nerd Show, where we talk about everything except the theme parks. We talk studio, we talk corporate, all that good stuff. Today, we are focusing on Inside Out 2 and Pixar in general. Before we dive into our topics at hand, Tonez, welcome back, sir. It's always good to have you, man.
Always good being here, brother. Being on the Orange Nerd Show is a little bit more my style rather than, when we talk about the park. So I love coming on this segment and doing shows and stuff like that. So always a pleasure talking to you, OG.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise. And if you could let everybody home know where they could find you on social media.
Oh, yeah. You guys can find me at Tonez_TV on all platforms. Guys, follow my YouTube, which is Bad Thought Studios, where we do TV, movie reviews, trailer breakdowns, trailer reactions. We're going to be doing a lot of House of the Dragon content here in the next couple days. Starting Sunday, we're going to be doing live shows and all that good stuff. So Bad Thought Studios, if you're interested.
Yes, and make sure you support them. I'll be linking it down below. Bad Thought Studio. Subscribe to them. I'll be on there a lot, right? Because we got the House of the Dragon stuff coming out. I'll be on there a lot once that show drops. So make sure you subscribe to Bad Thought Studio. Evan, it is awesome having you back, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me once again. It's always fun being on here. So I've been good. You guys can find most of my stuff on Nathan Rojas's channel, where we do Hyperspace Hype, covering a lot of the Acolyte material, which is always a lot of fun. We just watched episode 3 last night. I watched it again this morning. It's a great show. I'm loving that show. So we're talking Star Wars every week, and then of course movie, TV news every other week as well. So, and commentaries. We're watching movies, X-Men movies all the time this summer. So tune on in. And you guys can find me on Twitter at HarrisEV9 down below.
There he is. And I will, like Tonez, I will be linking Evan's socials down below in the description. Make sure you follow him on all those platforms and check out their podcast and everything. They do a great job over there. So support them as well. Show all the love. Here we go. Let's talk a little Inside Out. This is kind of interesting. So we'll start with the box office. This is kind of crazy. So Inside Out 2 is tracking to earn 80 to 90 million during the opening weekend at the domestic box office. If projections hold, it will dethrone Dune Part 2. This is crazy, right? As the biggest opening of 2024. This is courtesy of Variety. Evan, I will start with you. What are your thoughts on this, man? Is Pixar back? Or that's what we're hearing all over the news, all over the media, right? Pixar is back. Or what's going on?
I got a lot to say. The media, you gotta love them. You gotta love them because, Pixar is back. Pixar is back. I mean, granted, they haven't had the best critical reception recently. Elemental was a 73 on Rotten Tomatoes compared to a lot of the higher rated movies. But they've had some success. Elemental, like I just mentioned, wasn't the biggest success, but it was notable because it went on to make $500 million last year.
Exactly.
But yeah, this is not too surprising for me. I'm the biggest Dune Part 2 fan. I love Dune Part 2, but Dune Part 2 overperformed with 85 million. I thought it was gonna make 80 million, 75, but 85 or something like that, 86 million for Dune Part 2 for a rated R 3-hour movie. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. But Inside Out 2, I was always projecting this to be the biggest opening weekend of the summer. It might be dethroned by Despicable Me 4. You never want to underestimate that franchise.
Yeah.
But
I don't get that franchise, but the kiddos love it, right?
Granted, I don't think I've seen a single one. I saw the Hotel Transylvania movie. Illumination, just not for me. Thank God this isn't an Illumination podcast. That studio, I respect them for being very anti-AI and everything like that. But anyways, regarding this question, this tracking makes sense to me. You know what? I think this is conservative. And you would see a lot of studios do this. You see a lot of media outlets do this, where they give out their predictions just so they can say X, Y, and Z overperformed. This happened last weekend with Bad Boys for Life or Ride or Die. Where I was like, oh yeah, the one that came out in 2020 made like 62 million. This one's easily going to make over 50 million. But all the projections, even Sony was like, 35, 40 million. They want to say that so that way when it overperforms, it can be like, oh, we didn't see this coming. Yeah, you did. And I think the same thing is for Disney here. I think Disney is like tracking it like 80 to 90 million. I think this has an easy chance to go over 100. The first Inside Out made like what, 82, 85 million?
I believe so. Yeah, it was around there. So this has a shot at, like you were saying, like 100 million, you know?
Exactly. I think it'll overperform. I think my last projection was like 96 just to be safe. But like I think 100 million plus is definitely in the ballpark, especially given the high reviews. It's the summertime. This is perfect. A lot of the higher openings for Pixar have released around this time. Like if you look back to Incredibles 2, Finding Dory, those Toy Story 4, like those Pixar sequels always opened up to 100 million plus in the summertime in June or July. So this makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I agree, and it's funny because like we were saying, like the media and stuff. I feel like at least especially with the box office end of the equation for Pixar, it's really unfair to sort of like look at their like really like a lot of the films that you would look at and go, oh, that didn't do well, were films that were directly impacted by the pandy. So it's like, I mean, like between like Onward and all those other ones like Soul and Turning Red and all that stuff. It's like, how can we honestly assess like the recent track record of Pixar when a lot of it was like kneecapped because of the pandemic and the lockdowns and stuff? So it's like, and like you were saying, Evan, like Elemental, it started off kind of slow, but it legged out. You know, people really liked that movie. So that's why I kind of laugh a little bit when people say, yeah, Pixar is back. It's like, well, they never really left, you know what I'm saying? But this is going to be a huge hit for them. And I agree with you. I think 100 million is definitely on the table. Tonez, what are you thinking, man? This box office projection 80 to 90, you think it might go over, under?
Well, first I want to say, I don't think Pixar is back, because didn't they just release like 15% of their company like not too long ago?
Oh, you mean like the layoffs and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I wouldn't say a company's back if they just released 15% of it. Anyway, I do want to say this. This movie, from what I'm reading here, $175 million budget, which is crazy because Dune Part 2 was $190 million budget.
Right.
So you're go ahead, Devin.
Real quick, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but yeah, the Pixar budget situation is very fascinating. Like I think Elemental was 200 million. Like I did research about this last year when I realized Elemental cost 200 million. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Finding Dory and Toy Story 4 were also 200 million.
Like I think their budget, I think Disney or whoever's on top just says like, okay, your budget for this is going to be between 150 and 200, which, you know, it's astonishing, especially when we don't see huge jumps in animation or a lot of animation discrepancies between the movies. Like Elemental doesn't look that much better than Inside Out, which doesn't look that much better than the first Inside Out. Like all the Pixar movies are doing things that are pretty much samey in regards to their animation, while the recent like Spider-Verse movies are like 120, low 100. Even the first Into the Spider-Verse is like, I think, sub 100. Which is astonishing, given that like it's the story that matters, and the animation is a lot more unique than what Pixar is doing. I'm like, Pixar, if your animation budget is so high, do something interesting with your animation.
Yeah, well said. I love the stylized, different approach that Spider-Verse has been utilizing. I mean, it's incredible, and it's for a lot less than what they're spending with the Pixar stuff. So it's interesting. But go ahead, Tonez. You were saying like, so this budget's crazy. So you're thinking that it's going to have a high hurdle. I mean,
yeah, I mean, the mindset of it is, if you have that kind of a budget, it has to be making these kind of numbers at 80-90 million dollars in the opening week. And this movie it's a fun concept. You get the different personalities inside this teen, which I'm assuming is going to high school from what I read. Like you're getting these different kind of or middle school, you're getting these different kind of personalities in this one person. It's a fun concept, and it should do well. And this movie is very, very fun to watch. Like Pixar has really good has always been a very good watch for most of these Toy Story, Finding Nemo. Like you get these very good movies, and this should be one of them. And the only thing I question is these predictions that we hear 80 90 million. Where is that from? What data shows it should be getting 80 to 90 million dollars? Because I'm not that I'm saying it's wrong. I'm not too familiar with what kind of data is we're looking at to get those kind of projections.
I can help you out there. Mostly it's from the pre-ticket sales, like the tickets that as soon as they say, hey, this movie is live, you can buy tickets on Fandango or wherever you buy tickets.
Yeah.
After that first week is when people start doing their projections based off of ticket sales and the history. If it's an IP, they look at the history of the IP. If it's an original flick, they use like the genre as a whole to try and like predict where this might be.
Gotcha,
and usually,
okay.
and this is from a lot smarter people than me. But yeah, usually it's the ticket sales before the movie even comes out. And those can be very wrong or they can be very right because you take into account like, hey, it's an animated movie. A lot of families are going to see this. Are families the kind to buy tickets ahead of time, or are they a lot of people who just do walk-ups? And if they're walk-ups, then you kind of adjust your prediction accordingly.
And that does say a lot. If they're getting pre-sales before the movie even drops, and they're projecting that much money, that's something to say, man. It's something to say.
Yeah, it's wild. Now, when do we know when that Despicable Me movie comes out? Roughly, is it like?
Great question. I think it's like July. I was just looking at my calendar actually. I think so. I think Inside Out 2 is a lot of runway.
July 3rd.
July 3rd. So we have a few weeks before that comes out because that's gonna be huge. I mean, the kids love Despicable Me, so that's gonna be huge. That will cut into Inside Out, but Inside Out, like you were saying, Evan, has some runway to kind of stack chips sort of before Despicable Me comes out. So we'll see, And then I think Disney even said officially this isn't going to go to the streaming services for 100 days.
Wow.
So. Wow. That's interesting. That's a full 3 months.
It could be a good thing though. I'm always on that side of do not tell people when you're going to be putting this on the streaming platform because to me that's a detriment to what you're going to be making in the box office, and it's just as simple as that. And it streaming has made that a reality now. That if you say, okay, we're going to wait 50 days or 60 days before we put this on the streaming platform, there's just no point of going to go see it because when it's going to be coming in 3 months.
Well, yeah, and you have a great point. You make a great point there, Tonez, especially with like animation where you have the whole family going. It's not cheap going to the movies, Exactly. And so if you're a family of like 5, you're a young couple, you got like 2 or 3 kids, that's going to cost you, to go to the theater. So that's why I think animation kind of does struggle lately with the theater stuff because people kind of have to make that decision. Is this worth spending so much money in the theater for this, or should we just wait for Disney Plus or the streaming service? Well, what are your thoughts on this, Evan, in terms of like, the streaming element?
Let's talk about this because the whole streaming element, the streaming handicap that has been facing a lot of these movies, but in this case, Pixar, the topic of today, Disney did this to themselves with the construction of Disney Plus. Like they really shot themselves in the foot. We mentioned it earlier with how they relegated Soul beginning in 2020, which was my favorite movie of the year, by the way. I love Soul. Coming out in December, immediately putting that on Disney Plus, I think it was like Christmas Day. And there was no like theatrical element, which was weird because the same weekend they released Wonder Woman 2, which did decently well, even though it came out December of the pandemic. Like there was still an option to put it out in theaters. And then, of course, they handicapped all their other Disney/Pixar movies as well in like Raya the Last Dragon, Luca, right? The next summer was Luca, and then Turning Red as well. And people kind of use that to say like maybe that's why Lightyear didn't do as well in 2022, even though I think Lightyear was also just not a good movie. But yeah, and I think it's very interesting. I think for Pixar, which is why they announced Toy Story 4 or Toy Story 5, Inside Out 2, Frozen 3. Like they're announcing these sequels, these safe bets to put Pixar and Disney Animation Studios back into the conversation because of what they did to themselves by putting everything in streaming, getting families used to the idea that, hey, oh, this is just going to be on streaming immediately. So they kind of got to get over that hurdle. And by putting sequels out into the market is going to get people used to seeing Pixar again. Even though I think Elemental did a great job last year as well.
Now, do you think they're kind of slowly crawling their way out of that situation, Evan, with families being kind of conditioned for that streaming thing, or do they still have a long way to go?
I think we're getting out of there. I think Elemental did a great job. I think Inside Out 2, of course, is going to do a great job. Basically, it's a sequel, so it's like, hey, I know this property. I'm more inclined to see this in theaters and not wait for Disney Plus because I know what I'm getting into. If it's an original property, they're like, maybe I'll just wait. But I think between Elemental, Inside Out 2 doing really good, I think it's really going to help a very unknown property next year in Elio. I think that's going to be a bigger test to see if people are back to seeing Pixar. Because Pixar used to be like, put anything out in theater, sequel or not, and it'll do really well. Minus Good Dinosaur. I don't know what that was about. But we don't talk about that one. I still haven't seen Good Dinosaur. But yeah, I think Elio, just give up the trailers. I liked the trailers. They're not like the best trailers, but I think that's going to be an interesting one in terms of like original Pixar back into the market and doing decently well. But then again, that goes back to the budget. Whereas like if Elio has like a $150 to $200 million budget, then it might change the narrative there for that.
Yeah, and Disney's got to be real careful too with the budgeting stuff. Because like, for example, like studios like Illumination or like DreamWorks, a lot of their stuff is done overseas, and that's why it's cheaper. And so I'm afraid, like, Disney is such a legacy studio. I mean, they with Walt Disney and what he did here in California, and it would be sad, I think, for them to outsource it, out of that Burbank studio with all the history there and everything. I hope that Disney does find a way to balance, because they do got to get the budgets down, but you have to be careful. You gotta be careful. You can't go too. You want to be very surgical with this, where you're not. So we'll see. But go ahead.
Can I just ask a quick question? We all know Netflix has a thing where they put movies out, and it doesn't go to the theaters. Right. Now, do you think that will be a detriment to Disney if they were to put movies that they make just straight to the Disney Plus app? Or Disney Plus, or do you think
it'll never be in theaters?
And never be in theaters. Now, I'm not saying what Netflix does is right, because there's movies that I would love to go watch movies, to go to the movies and watch and experience. Like when I went to Endgame and watched Endgame in the movie theaters, it was an experience of its own, just sitting with fans watching a movie like this. But if you have these like single or these movies like Inside Out or whatever the case may be, and you throw it on the Disney app straight from when you're done making it, would that be a detriment to the movie and not make as much money even though they streamed it?
It's hard. I think for one, they tried it doing the pay to put it on streaming, like for example, I don't know. Did Soul cost? I think Soul was free. I think Soul just dropped. But like maybe Luca did too. Maybe all the Pixar ones did.
Well, like Raya, it was Premier Access, right? I think
Raya was Premier Access. But yeah, maybe it was just the Disney animation ones that were Premier Access, not Pixar. But either way, they did try it. And I hope not. I hope we moved beyond relying on Disney Plus. We even know like Disney Plus, the people at Disney Plus are just kind of restructuring the shows. Like they're not going to do any more Pixar spin-off TV shows anymore because of the lack of success there. So I think probably not. I think they're going to try relying less on Disney Plus. Because for them, they're not getting like because for Netflix, they gauge how many people subscribe, the subscriptions, and that's a healthy base for them. I don't know if Disney Plus is that successful yet. We're only on year 5 or 6. So
yeah. And the other thing too, if you drop a movie like, let's say for example Inside Out 2, you drop that in theaters, and that movie does good numbers in theaters. Well, okay, families then obviously like loved that movie because it did bonkers numbers. So now you get the box office numbers, money, and then when it goes on to Disney Plus eventually, now people are like, oh, that movie was really good. So now they're tuning into Disney Plus. So you win both ways. Whereas if you just drop it on Disney Plus, you bypass the box office money, which is a huge element of the whole thing, you know. And especially like we were saying with these animated movies, and especially Disney, I mean, with the budgets like the way they are, I mean, I know they're going to try to bring them down. Bob Iger has said they're trying to, but I mean, it's a lot harder to make your money back when you're just dropping it right onto the streaming service, you know? So
exactly. If they did that again, I'm pretty sure they would have to do the pay $20 to do that. Like
that Premier Access stuff, right? Where you pay, yeah. We'll see. We'll see if they ever bring that back. I'm kind of curious about that too. They tried that during the pandy for like a little bit with like some animation. I think Cruella was like that. Mulan, live action.
Yeah. And you're right. I don't know how successful that was. We haven't seen it in a while, right? So I think they're kind of slowly moving away from that. Hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go ahead and see what kind of, because I've been seeing a lot, at least on my timeline, and this is, I mean, it all kind of depends, I guess. But what I've seen on Twitter is pretty positive for this movie. I just kind of hit the hashtag, and I'll read just a couple of these. This is from Sean Chandler. He said, Inside Out 2 is a film which finds new creative ways to visualize what goes on in our heads while still being entertaining. It's so insightful that you want people, teenagers in particular, to watch it to understand themselves better. As good as the first Pixar's best film in years. And then we got like another one here where it says Inside Out 2 beautifully showcases the complexities of growing up and handling all the self-awareness emotions going through our heads. We can make room for all of them and still thrive. One of Pixar's best. And you got to go through here and you kind of see that we're seeing like a common thread here where it's like a lot of talk about this is either one of Pixar's best or Pixar's best, or, you know, one of the best ones they've done in a long time. It seems pretty encouraging. I think it premiered on Rotten Tomatoes at like 90%. I'm not like too big on like Rotten Tomatoes because I think a lot of that, there's a lot of games people play with certain properties and things. I don't really trust it 100%. I mean, it's really not a good measuring stick.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Here we go.
There was a review on House of the Dragon season 1 when season 1 came out. There was a huge critic. I don't remember the name, but actually, I don't know if she was a huge critic, but she was a critic nonetheless. And her vote and her went to a website. I believe it was Rotten Tomatoes. Okay. She said, I'm not even going to watch this show because of how bad Game of Thrones was, the season 8. I'm not going to watch this show, and I'm going to give it a negative score. And it went viral. It went completely viral. I made a TikTok about it. Everyone was pissed. Like, this whole thing happened, and I don't know what happened to her. I don't know what the case may be, but man, I'm sure she's not the only one that does that.
Oh, dude, there's a lot of activism on Rotten Tomatoes. Oh, this movie's woke. We're gonna downvote, you know, and this whole thing. It's there for sure, and that's why I'm saying I don't really trust it at all. Whether they're good numbers, bad numbers, I don't really trust it. But a lot of these people that are coming back from the film seem to like it. I'm seeing a lot of people come back say, "Hey, this is actually pretty good." I trust these more than I do anything from Rotten Tomatoes. But what do you think, Evan? What are your thoughts on kind of like this early word of mouth and even the Rotten Tomatoes element? You know,
I'm not surprised. I think I've seen a lot of people who love Pixar movies, who get invited to those Pixar movies, love it, obviously. Which I think is smart by Disney. They invite the people who are most likely going to say, "Oh, this movie's great," to their premieres. I mean, it happens to all their other studios as well. But I'm not surprised. I was looking forward to this movie, and I was so excited to see how the supporting cast, the new characters, were going to do. And I'm very excited to see a lot of praise so far for Ayo Edebiri from The Bear. Her character, she's playing. She's a new character. I forget who she's playing now. Sadness? No. Whoever she's playing, she's getting a lot of praise, but specifically Maya Hawke as well, who plays Anxiety in this movie, has been getting a lot of praise. That's what intrigued me looking at all the reactions last night or 2 nights ago, seeing how a lot of the supporting cast is doing good. Amy Poehler and the people that returned also doing predictably well in terms of their voice acting for the roles. I think the emotional arc for the movie was also very intriguing for me because this is like an easy layup. A lot of people are asking me, like, for Inside Out 2, hey, let's just do Riley going to high school. There's a lot of interesting young adolescent emotions that the movie can talk about that people can relate to. And luckily, I think from the positive reviews that I've been seeing, people have said those emotional beats hit, which is pretty good as well. I'm not hearing a lot of people say it's as, besides that one person that we saw, I'm not seeing a lot of people say like it's the best Pixar movie or it's even better than the first, but it is a great sequel. It follows up the themes well, the characters well, and it really captures that young adolescent element of it all.
And I think in terms of the character design, it's a challenge when you have a sequel to a movie to kind of get these. We actually did a Story Geeks on this with Jay recently, where to kind of get the new characters to sort of fit seamlessly into this existing world, right? Yeah. And it's like, I feel like these characters, like Anxiety, I feel like this character has always been there. Like I can't picture this franchise without this character. Like, right? It's just so seamlessly inserted into the franchise. And that's how you know they did a good job, I think, with the design work at least. I haven't seen the movie yet, but at least how they look, they fit in really well with the other emotions. It feels like they've always been part of it. You know what I'm saying?
Agreed. And I think that's the beauty of Inside Out, because it's all about emotions. And, humans have a ton of emotions. I think they barely even scratched the surface with just Inside Out 2. Like, this is one of the rare Pixar franchises where you can do a lot of sequels. Hey, Riley, you're going to college. Like, that's guaranteed. Inside Out 3 is basically guaranteed. Like, college Riley. Hell, when she becomes an adult Riley. Like, because we've seen, like, one of my favorite Pixar movie, Incredibles. They talk about like adulthood a lot there with what Mr. Incredible is going through, just in the job, in the occupational circuit there. So I'm just like, there's plenty of sequels and opportunities that they can go into. And yeah, I think it's very seamless how they're adding all these emotions, because there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of like examples for where they can go with this franchise.
It'd be wild, and this would never happen, but this is a kind of a crazy concept to have like a crossover film where you have Andy from Toy Story as an adult, and then the characters, like the Inside Out, the emotions are.
Oh my god, that would be cool.
The wildest, craziest crossover ever. But yeah, I don't want to give Bob Iger too many ideas. He would get a little too excited with so much IP crossover there, I think, That's funny. But it's pretty. I think it's actually kind of cool, though. All kidding aside, I think it'd be kind of cool. But what do you guys think about this? Okay, Evan, you brought this to my attention. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Oh boy, Pete Doctor, you got some explaining to do.
Here we go. So Pixar is now focusing on films with, quote, clear mass appeal, end quote, with less focus on directors, quote, autobiographical tales, end quote, like Luca and Turning Red. The studio's movies should be less a pursuit of any director's catharsis and instead speak to a commonality of experience. I'll start with you, Evan, and then I'll go to Mr. Tonez. What are your thoughts on this, man?
This baffled me because I'm a huge Pete Docter fan. Like, I think he's great. I think he understands, first of all, the animation of Pixar. He understands the creativity and the limitless potential that Pixar has, like the gem that they have as a studio. But this quote, though, is not it. It is very baffling. I know. And I think, first of all, I admire how do I phrase this? Like, I admire how he's open and willing to understand that Pixar has had some bumps critically and financially. But I think circling the reason for that, like we talked about the reason, it was the streaming of it all. It wasn't really any much so the quality of their movies. Granted, I didn't like Onward that much, but anyways, like he decided to single out Luca and Turning Red. Luca, which went straight to Disney Plus, like we talked about, and Turning Red, which also kind of went straight to Disney Plus, I think. Both those movies didn't really have a chance in the theatrical world, so much so that Disney kind of tried to re-release them earlier this year to little to no fanfare. And saying that clear mass appeal is not associated with autobiographical tales like Luca and Turning Red is the exact opposite of what makes Pixar so special. Those two things are related. People a lot of people, there's a mass appeal with people in terms of relating to a lot of the personal Pixar stories. We've seen this with Incredibles. You've seen this Toy Story. They may seem like, ordinary, hey, this movie's about superheroes or toys, but the personal elements of those movies are clearly relatable to a lot of different people. Monsters Inc., for example, too. Movies like Luca and Turning Red aren't necessarily brand new in terms of telling autobiographical tales or niche kind of regional tale. For example, like Turning Red about Asian Americans. Like, that's not necessarily new. It is for Pixar, but there is always going to be clear mass appeal there because even if she is Asian, people can relate to everything that's going on there in Turning Red.
Thank you. Exactly. Yeah, just because the character is Asian doesn't mean that the circumstances around that character is not relatable to someone who's white, black, whatever. I mean, that's really, it's a weird comment by Pete Docter. I mean, even Luca, a story about friendship and family. Anyone can relate to that. You don't have to be Italian to relate to that. So that was a really weird, really weird comment. And I don't know. And from what I understand too, Luca, because we do a lot of theme park stuff here, the merch for Luca sold really, really well. So I don't know why he's saying like mass appeal wasn't a thing for Luca, because I mean, from what I understand, the merch was like moving like crazy, and it's been the meet and greet that they have right now for Pixar Fest is doing very, very well with Luca. So it seems like people really like these characters. Turning Red as well. I don't understand that, and the funny thing too is that they even have Turning Red as a focal point for the new parade. It's like, well, wait a minute. I thought this wasn't mass appeal, but it's part of the parade. Like the main focus of the parade is Turning Red, a massive part of it at least. But what are your thoughts, Tones, on this in terms of Pete Docter's comments?
I just don't like the words he's using. Clear mass appeal, like what everyone appeals to, what everyone likes is what I get from that. And It's like, and then he goes, and less focus on autobiographical tale. It almost, I'm not saying this is him, but like people will take this as a racist comment. I'm not saying it is, in no way, shape, or form is it, but it's weird how people take stuff like this. And it sucks because it almost looks like he doesn't want to go to a Latin or Italian or whatever the case may be, just because it looks like it's trying to appeal to one race. But it's like that's not how it works. Because you're Italian doesn't mean I can't feel what you feel. You know what I'm saying? It's almost what it sounds like he's saying. But people don't take it. People will take this way too far than it probably should go. But go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, and I want to make sure, because this is a quote from the article, but I want to get Pete Docter's exact quote here as well, which again, it's the same thing here, where he says, because some people might be like, oh, and I saw it in some of the comments where, not our comments, but on Twitter, where they're like, oh, maybe they're taking his quotes out of context, and they're not. Like, he specifically says, I don't think we can ever let ourselves off the hook of making sure that we deliver the best possible and most relatable films. In contrast to what he's talking about with with Elemental, Turning Red, and Luca. And I'm like, you don't need to change anything here. Like, I think again, Luca and Turning Red would have been widely successful if they were in a widely theatrical marketplace. You put them on Disney Plus, so it seems like they weren't received very well, which is astonishing to me. Turning Red is one of the most highest rated Pixar films, bringing up Rotten Tomatoes. I think it has like a 95 or 96. It's one of the most highest rated Pixar movies of 2022. So it really astonishes me that people like Pete Docter can kind of say that and rely on sequels. That's not what makes Pixar so special. It wasn't really relying on sequels to justify itself. Again, we are getting Inside Out 2 literally this week, but that was a safe bet, and it makes sense. Like, I'm excited for the sequel, but we shouldn't be relying on sequels. We should be using the sequels to get people back to understanding what Pixar is all about, and going back to the theater for sure, and then using that, new fame and new appeal to appeal then to the original films in LEO and all the other future original films that they have cooking up there. We should not be relying on sequels. And the same thing goes for Disney Animation. Like, I really don't want them relying on sequels either.
And I do want to clarify. I'm not saying this was a racist comment. I'm just saying people will take it that way, and as if other like autobiography. How do you say the word? I feel like I'm fucking it up.
You're right. Autobiographical. Yeah.
There you go.
Autobiographical appeal or storylines. It almost sounds like he doesn't think those will be a mass appeal, which I think is completely false. I think you should focus more on what a good story is rather than where it comes from. Like it's as simple as that. And people, it's mind-boggling that someone would see it a different way than just that.
Well, look at Toy Story. It's one of the biggest not just one of the biggest franchises for Pixar, but one of the biggest franchises of all time. Are any of us actual toys? No. but we can relate to them because of experiences and relationships and what have you. That's why we cry in these movies. We're not toys, but like we can relate to that on some level. Same goes for different cultures. You don't have to be Asian or Italian to relate to these stories, and yeah, a really weird comment from him. And I'm kind of, honestly, I've always liked Pete Docter, but I'm kind of disappointed in him, to be honest with you.
He's a smart guy. And like when these executives say something that is so blatantly weird, like Tonez said, like it can come across, especially with social media these days, it can come across very much like, oh, you think stories about Italians or Asian Americans aren't relatable. So you think the white stories are going to be super mass appealing? Is that what you're only going to be looking towards? I don't think that's what he's saying, but it kind of, I don't blame people for coming to that conclusion because kind of like you're narrowing your scope of quote unquote appeal here by excluding those autobiographical stories that people are bringing to your company. I think one of the good things that come out of this, or at least for Turning Red, was that like the person in charge of Turning Red is like got elevated, I think, in terms of her position in Pixar recently. I remember that being announced recently that I think the person has like either another movie coming out or she just has a higher creative role within Pixar, which is very good to hear. I think she did a great job with Turning Red. I really like Turning Red. And yeah, I just think in general, it felt like a very weird comment because I think you brought up Toy Story, which is a film mostly about like friendships, that topic of nostalgia that I think everybody can kind of relate to. Incredibles, again, my favorite. Incredibles is so brilliant because as it being a family, people can relate to Mr. Incredible's work and what he's relating to as a father, the mother angle in terms of like caring for kids, but also needing time for herself. And then the kids, of course, Violet and Dash going through middle and high school respectively. I think you can relate to a lot of those things, a family dynamic. Even Monsters, Inc., like nobody can relate to monsters, but people can relate to the aspect of dreams and the nighttime and the friendships along the way, those kind of things. So it's just, again, there's a lot of different personal stories that people really input into a lot of their Pixar films. I think going back to Monsters, Inc., actually, I think the director kind of was influenced by his relationship with his daughter or something like that. There's always a personal element into all these Pixar movies. And they may not be as wide spanning as like all like Asian Americans or something like that, like Turning Red, but they're still easily accessible and easily appealing to a lot of different people, which I think makes it all special.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
And I think this happens to a lot of people. I think we're missing the good stories because I feel like a lot of these writers are trying to appeal to a certain niche or a certain group. Like I feel like the mindset of like writing a good story has been lost somewhere, and I feel like a lot of these, these woke movies or woke TV shows, whatever the case may be, I feel like we're missing the point of a good storyline in recent films. And don't get me wrong, some of those movies need to be made to spread awareness to some things, but I think movies in general are trying to appeal too much to a certain group or a certain niche or a certain, whatever the case may be. And I think we're just missing the whole point of just make a good story, make it appealing, make up a good concept to a film, and I promise you will make good money. like you get your money back. And I don't know. I could be wrong. I could be talking out of my ass, but that's just how I feel.
Yeah, I think people like all writers, like I don't want them writing to somebody. Write something that's personal to you. Like, and that's always going to make it the best story. If you're writing for somebody else or for a different group of people, then that's when you kind of like get into hiccups and flaws when you're kind of writing to appeal to people. But like write something that's personal to you and people will follow that. Like whether that is something that's super personal or super nostalgic to you, whatever it is, people will follow it because I think the more personal, the more you can really get into your own personal writing, the more it's going to be good. I think people kind of losing sight of that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Tones, I do apologize. I think I skipped you when we were talking about the reviews for the film, the early reviews. Before we move on to our next topic, any thoughts on that in terms of like the general early word of mouth in regards to this movie being?
Yeah, I mean, if I kind of mention it, if they're getting pre-sales to this movie and people are liking it and they loved it the first one so much, I believe this movie is going to do well. I think it's going to make that kind of $80 to $90 million in pre-sales. I mean, or from the pre-sales, and I think that's amazing. I think Pixar needs to have a win here or there. They haven't, to my knowledge, I haven't seen a movie from Pixar in a while that made people talk about a Pixar movie. And as far as the review for this movie, I've heard nothing but good things about it. Before we started the show, I watched a couple people's out of theater reviews, and they loved it. They loved the no spoilers or anything, but they loved the concept of new emotions coming in and the old emotions trying to not fight back in like the punch back sense, but they're trying, that's what I got the general consensus of what people liked about it. And I think that's cool. That's a cool, like I said, it's a cool concept to a movie, a cool concept to a Pixar movie. So yeah, I could see good things happen for this movie for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, our last and final topic, I want to talk another comment from Pete Docter. He was talking about live action remakes, and they've never done a live action Pixar remake. And he said Pixar's not interested in doing that, which is interesting to me because he said they're not interested and they've never done one before with Pixar. So it makes me wonder too, how much control or say the animation studios have in regards to what gets live, what gets created as a live action, right? Because it's kind of a weird coincidence that Pete Docter saying, well, we don't want to do those, and they haven't done them.
So real quick, OG, is it a live action remakes or remakes to animated movies?
Live action remakes.
Okay.
He said he's not interested in doing that, but they made a bunch of them for Disney. So I'm wondering, like, there's something, I don't know, and I could be reading too much into it, but I just feel like that's a kind of interesting dynamic right there, that they've never done a Pixar one. Pete Docter said they don't want to. And then, but with Disney Animation, they've done a ton of them. So is Disney Animation more open to that, and that's why they are making these live action remakes? What do you think, Evan? What are your thoughts?
That's a great. I didn't even think about that, but that's a great point. Who's the current head of Disney Animation? Is it Jennifer from Frozen?
Jennifer Lee? Yeah.
Obviously Iger's above Jennifer and Pete Docter. But did Jennifer have any power over what can be a Disney live action remake over from Disney? I don't think she does. But in that same sense, I don't think Pete Docter does. Like, I think if Bob Iger says, I want to do a Monsters Inc. live action baby, can Pete Docter veto that? But I don't think he can, but I think Iger would realize, I think the people up top who are able to make these decisions will realize it's a lot harder to do a Pixar live action than Disney. Which might seem weird because they are very similar concepts, but if you dive into it, Cinderella, a lot of the Disney animation movies have human princess-like characters. In Pixar, it's very difficult. Like, you could do Luca. I think Luca's pretty, like, not overly fantastical.
Or Brave, maybe. Like a
or
Brave.
Brave. Yeah, Luca, Brave.
I mean, we have Cars. We could do like a Transformers kind of thing.
Michael Bay to do a Cars live action remake. Let's go.
Let's go.
I would actually pay money to see that. Oh my god. But yeah, a lot of the other Pixar ones, like Toy Story, impossible to do in live action. Like, what are you gaining from a Toy Story, from a Monsters Inc., or again, like a Cars? Like, what are you gaining from that live action? I think in terms of live action, Disney thinks they can gain something by making it live action. They think they can appeal to a certain different audience who doesn't see these in animation to actually go see these in live action, or do like a unique spin on it. I don't know what unique spin. I don't know what kind of creative pool you can do with a Pixar live action movie.
Yeah.
It's very hard. I think Pete Docter even talked about it in his quote where he's like, the boundaries of animation, like the animated world, is kind of what makes most of these Pixar movies special. In terms of like, these are things you can only really capture in animation. When Wall-E's in space and like the glistening galaxy, like the whole, like the chaos or like the deadness, whatever it's called, of Earth and Wall-E, it's kind of hard to make that special in live action. It's something you can only really capture in animation. I've made this same argument because I'm a huge anime fan. I made the same argument with a lot of anime that I love. Like, it's very hard to capture that in live action. And I think Pete Docters are the same wavelength there.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Yeah, the subject material for Pixar you're right, is a lot harder to duplicate in live action. You just can't do it. And if you were to try to do it, you'd be CGIing the whole thing anyway, and you're back to animation. So, you know.
See what they did for the Beauty and the Beast, for example. It's like a lot of the cool, cups and pots or whatever they're fucking called. Like you just made it all CG. And granted, that's what you had to do, but it doesn't make it look cool or interesting. It's like, okay, that's it. And the live action Lion King, which I think is the worst one yet. It's atrocious. But it's just like there's nothing special or unique about it. Lion King is special because of the animation and what they can do in those sequences that they couldn't really do in live action. So the same thing for Pixar. Like if you're trying to make anything live action in Pixar, you're going to lose a lot of what makes it special. It's just not even going to be the same.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. What do you think, Tonez?
What's stopping Pixar from just making live action or just movies in general that isn't animated? What's the like instead? Okay, I get the remake kind of remake to live action. I get that. Like if that's what you don't want to do, but what's stopping Pixar as a company? I know it's connected to Disney, but are they only limited to animation movies?
Well, it's interesting because you look at it's a great question, yeah, because you look at something like Marvel, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They dip in both. They do animation, they do live action. I mean, their animation is doing really well right now with X-Men, 97 and everything. So why couldn't? I mean, I guess in theory, maybe Pixar could. Maybe they just, as a studio, they're not interested. I'm not really sure.
I think it just built into the brand that it is like an animation studio. But you're right. Like, is there somewhere in the contract where Disney's like, you guys are only making animated movies for the rest of your life? And they're like, cool, that's fine by us. But like, could they do live action?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, right? I guess it's the same argument you can make for other animated studios. Like, can Illumination do live action, or is it just built as animation?
Yeah,
that's interesting.
And it's hard now too because a lot of these animations, like for example, when Walt Disney created his studio, it was its own entity, so it made sense for him to dip into live action eventually and kind of do that. Where now, if you're a Pixar, it's like you're part of a bigger conglomerate, and that bigger conglomerate has other divisions and other studios that do the live action thing, and they kind of handle that. So it's like, there's I think an element there of that as well, where it's like, okay, well, we're one puzzle piece of this bigger puzzle, and we kind of do our animation over here. There's other studios in our same kind of, in our same bubble that handle the live action stuff, and we'll kind of let them do their thing. I don't know. It could be that.
Speaking of that, the live action space could need a Jennifer Lee. They kind of do need a Pete Docter to put some sauce in their live action stuff. Like, stop with the remakes and go back to like doing some interesting stuff here in terms of like your live action material. It was just like the anniversary recently of like Tomorrowland. And granted, I don't like Tomorrowland the movie, but like do some more stuff where you're appealing to your parks or appealing to just original material in general in your live action space.
Yeah, and
that's a whole other podcast in general.
Oh yeah. Well, and if you're gonna do live action, like a live action remake movies to give them a second shot. Like for example, like a live action Treasure Planet, because that movie did right. That would be so dope. Because that movie flopped at the box office. So make it live action, which would be a really cool live action movie actually, and give it a second shot. Give that franchise another chance to really resonate with audiences. You know, do some of those movies. You know, maybe do a Black Cauldron. You know, or something, you know, in live action, you know?
Right. I need to revisit Black Cauldron. Yeah.
Wally would be fire.
Would it in live action?
Dude, just a little Star Wars drone. Just yeah.
There you go. There you go. All practical. That's awesome.
They just send it into space. Like, oh shit.
There is.
Like the Mars rover, like, yeah, this is it. Yeah. 2 hours of the Mars rover.
That's awesome. What do you think?
Sorry, yeah.
Oh, good. No, go ahead, Evan. I'm sorry.
But yeah, I think I've been saying that for a long time. Give me some Black Cauldron. Give me some Treasure Planet, Atlantis in live action. Like, come on. Those are things which a lot of people didn't see. Well, now like the 90s kids or the people in our generation, they know all about Treasure Planet and Atlantis. But like the younger kids need to know about Treasure Planet. And I think by putting that in live action and doing that in live action will make people more excited to go back and watch its animated counterpart. So that part would be appealing. That part would definitely be appealing. They just need to be more creative over there in their live action space.
Yeah,
it's really weird.
Exactly. Tonez, any final thoughts before we get out of here today?
Yeah. So just the whole I get that's what they want to do. They don't want to remake live action, or they don't want to do a live action remake, which is understandable. They could go certain ways of making that happen. There's they have movies to do it, but at the same time it's like you almost have to be perfect with these live actions to make it as a remake. I should say, as a remake, you have to be perfect for this movie, and there's just not really too many perfect live action remakes out that we've seen that was just mind-blowing that we recommend it to everyone. There might be a couple I haven't seen any, so I understand the decision, but at the same time, why not just make live action movies that's not necessarily a remake? And if put in the comments, guys, let us know if there's some kind of contract, if there's some kind of thing that we do not know about Pixar only sticking to an animated kind of content. Please let us know, because we're not too sure.
Yeah, and with the live action remakes, you kind of set yourself up for like extreme critique when you try to follow up a masterpiece. Okay, exactly. when you go, oh, Beauty and the Beast, the crown jewel of Disney animation, one of the greatest animated movies they've ever done. Let's remake that. Yeah. Well, that's a tough hill to climb.
I do like that flop thing you were talking about. That is a good way of kind of redoing the storyline and making it live action. So that's another route they can go. I like that idea.
Yeah, because it would give that franchise that didn't do that great the first time a second opportunity to kind of resonate. And then now you have a franchise that was dead, and now you revived it. So it's interesting. Any final thoughts, Evan, before we go today?
Yeah, the whole Turning Red thing was bugging me, but it seems like as recently as what's today? Today, the 12th, like Dami Shi, who did Turning Red, might have taken over the director's chair for Elio. That might be a new thing. Because they said the film was originally set to be directed by Adrian Molina, who did Coco, but that might have changed, which makes sense because Elio did get delayed. It was supposed to come out this year, or it was supposed to come out in 2025. Now it's coming out in 2026.
Interesting.
So Elio is going through some shifts. But again, and I was looking at the article again to make sure what P. Doctor said. And yeah, I think to clarify some final thoughts, I think Pixar movies should not be moving away from the personal. Stick with the personal. Again, everybody could relate to Toy Story, yes, but it was a personal element. Everybody personally, like, they love toys. Like, there's always a personal element in Pixar movies, and I really don't like Pete Docter throwing a lot of the people of color people under the bus. That's what it kind of feels like. But I'm very excited, though, for the future of Pixar, and hopefully they can keep on telling these personal stories that at the same time are universally relatable. I think they just stick with what they've been doing successfully. And I'm excited for the sequels too. Inside Out 2, It's kind of be like one of their. I don't know what other sequels they can get from Pixar besides Inside Out, but I think they said like they are trying to. They might be scratching something for Monsters Inc. or an Incredibles 3, which I'm like, yeah, maybe not. Because I didn't really love Incredibles 2. But we shall see. Again, I'm very excited for Inside Out 2 and very excited for the future of Pixar. I think even though I have some criticisms with Pete Docter, I think he still is the right person for the job over there at Pixar. He's had such a huge legacy. We can do like a 2-hour episode on Pete Docter's legacy alone at Pixar. So yeah, despite his comments, I'm very excited for his influence and what he's doing over there at Pixar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well said. And I think we just got news the other day too that Andrew Stanton is going to helm Toy Story 5.
Yes. And he did the previous Toy Stories or just 1 and 2 or what?
I believe he did Nemo.
Or he
if
did.
I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
He did Nemo, which I do love Nemo. Love Nemo.
Let me double check on that before.
Because is he new to the franchise? I looked it up when I found it.
He did Nemo, he did Finding Dory and Wall-E and Bug's Life. Okay. So he's got a decent resume there at Pixar.
Interesting. I wonder. Now I'm forgetting who freaking directed the Toy Story movies. It wasn't Pete Docter, was it? It was somebody else.
Yeah. I think was it Lasseter who was.
It might have been Lasseter.
Yeah.
John Lasseter. Yep.
Maybe that's why I'm forgetting it. I'm like, hey yo. Maybe I was like, oh, who was it? Yeah. Anyways. But yeah, so yeah, that's interesting. Like you're right. I totally blanked on Toy Story 5. Actually, you really enjoyed Toy Story 4. I know it has its criticism, but like I had a really fun time with Toy Story 4. So I'm very curious to see what they can really do with Toy Story 5. It's a big gamble.
Yeah, no, it is. Absolutely. Gentlemen, always a pleasure talking shop with you guys. Tonez, I will start with you. If you could let everybody at home know where they could find you on social media, your YouTube channel, all that good stuff.
Yes, sir. Thank you again, OG, for having me. Always good talking to you. Evan, always good talking to you too, brother. We've done a couple episodes, and man, you are a smart guy. So thanks again for coming on my show and talking to us on here. But yeah, guys, if you guys want to find me on social media, Tonez_TV on all platforms. Like I said before, we are doing a whole bunch of House of the Dragon Season 2 content on Bad Thought Studios. We're going to be doing our show reactions, our live reactions to parts of the show. We're going to be doing a roundtable and breakdowns of each episode, and we also do trailer reactions, movie breakdowns, and stuff on my YouTube. So Bad Thoughts Studios on YouTube. Also, I have a podcast, Bad Thoughts Podcast, on YouTube and Spotify with me and Candid Camper.
There we go. And down below, Evan, thank you for joining. If you could let everybody home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me again. I love talking about Pixar, box office especially. I did a whole box office episode on one of my other channels that I go on called Where Heartbreak Feels Good. And we had Inside Out 2 as like the number 1 or number 2 movie of the summer next to Despicable Me and Deadpool. It's going to be very – I'm a huge box office fan, so I'm very curious to see how these things match up.
Do you think Deadpool will do better – or yeah, do you think Deadpool will do better than Dune 2, like as far as like movie wise?
Yes. Yeah. I see Deadpool 2 being like the biggest R-rated movie of the year next to Dune and possibly Joker. And I think Deadpool and Wolverine has the potential to crack $1 billion. So we'll see. Like I just whenever those trailers pop up, even the PSAs that are happening in theaters where it's like, turn the cell phones off. Like people are loving those PSAs.
Oh yeah.
They're funny.
They're really funny, awesome. And I think in the trailer for me is just really good. I think Deadpool Wolverine is going to be a huge hit. It might crack $1 billion, but yeah, even it's funny because I think the Joker, the first one, also cracked $1 billion. So that might be a sleeper hit this fall as well in terms of like superhero movies and whatnot, comic books. So yeah, I'm just very excited and very curious for the box office. But yeah, you guys can follow me again. Harris EV9 in just 20 to 30 minutes. I'm doing a commentary on X-Men Days of Future Past with my friend Nathan. I love that movie, but this is our first time watching the Rogue cut, which is an additional extended cut. So I'm very curious to see what elevates the material there. So yeah, check us out there. And once again, we do a lot of Star Wars stuff as well. So we do an Acolyte probably on Friday. So if you like Acolyte, if you like Star Wars, follow me on Twitter and see what I'm up to.
Absolutely. Show these gentlemen some love. I will be linking all of their stuff in the description down below. Thank you all so much for watching. Comment down below with all your thoughts on everything we discussed today. Inside Out 2, we're early word of mouth, box office, Pete Doctor, his comments. We want to hear from you down below in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching OG55.